Hi, I'm Dan from Perion Network, and I'm happy to welcome you to an episode of AdTechTalks by Perion. This is a series of conversations with AdTech experts about the happenings in our industry. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Joe Ward, RVP of Sales West at Undertone, obviously a Perion company. Hi, Joe.
Hi, nice to be here.
Joe has been a member of Undertone since 2016 and has worked in digital media since 1998. Joe, with his 20 plus years of experience, has worked with startups and companies, pivoting to address the changing digital landscape. In previous roles, he has established practices addressing TV viewership, creative technology, affiliate marketing, and search optimization. Well, I want to welcome you to New York City today, and thank you for joining us for an AdTech Talk episode. We're chatting today about a topic that is so relevant and ever-changing, something that I personally have grown to be very passionate about. We're talking about privacy. While Joe is RVP of Sales, he has become extremely well-versed in the topic of privacy in the context of digital media. Before we start talking about privacy, we want to spice it up a bit with numbers. Everybody knows about the Apple changes. How did it impact financially some other players in the industry?
Well, if you look at ever since iOS 14 rolled out and the Apple's app tracking transparency, you can see just in the valuations of social media companies have taken a huge hit. They're from Facebook's own reporting, it looked like they took about a $10 billion hit when people were able to opt out of tracking through Apple's apps. So it's a significant hit.
So practically what happened is that because of the changes led by privacy, made it harder for advertisers to target the right audiences.
Yes.
And this hurt the valuation of the social networks.
Absolutely. It made it harder for advertisers to reach audiences and prove that their advertising budgets were leading to a sale or an acquisition. So that really put a dent in Facebook's own efforts.
Why is there suddenly demand for privacy? And why now? And is it something that happened in this last year, or this is something gradual? I mean, I wonder what your thoughts about that.
Of course. If you think about it, it's been building for a while. So we talk about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Web 2 was really the advent of social media, where it became much easier for consumers to post content online. Mm-hmm. And as they began posting content online, the social platforms began collecting all of that data. And over time, that data became much more granular and much more actionable. So what you see is people start posting their photos of their families or their friends or reconnecting with people from high school. All of that was a good benefit. But then in around 2016 or so, a lot of our targeting became so granular and so sophisticated that it really started having an impact in the world at large. And speaking of 2016, there was a big election here in the United States, and out of that came the Cambridge Analytica debacle, some might say, where Cambridge Analytica was able to tap into all of that data that existed in the social media space, and were able to really target ads that drove a wedge between a lot of people and really played on their fears, their motivations in the political arena. But then it became much bigger. So
in a way, the scandal created understanding to the public and then legislators that this is a problem. I mean, there is tons of data collected about individuals, and this could be used by the advertisers, and advertisers could be also political candidates.
Exactly. So people saw the results of the data that they were putting out there, and they were freely giving to the social media space. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it had such a big impact in the real world that people started pulling back, and they realized, wait, I've given too much data. I don't know where my data is being used. I don't know who's tapping into it, because they had given this, in Cambridge Analytica, they had given Facebook access to this data, and a third party was coming in and using the data for their own purposes.
Interesting. So practically, we are living with internet for over 2 decades, but it had changed. I mean, and you've been around for a while. I mean, do you have some example or thoughts? I mean, how it changed? I mean, the treating users' privacy.
Yeah, so there are a number of different examples. We think about social media that we just talked about. There are also apps that we're collecting for a time, just turning on your microphone.
Yeah.
So Several apps that had no business accessing a microphone were then listening to what's happening around
Why
someone.
not? Why not collect the data and listening to you
Exactly.
24/7?
Exactly. So they could listen to you. And one of my previous companies actually was in talks with some of these companies that were using the microphone so we could triangulate what people were watching on TV, which ads they were hearing. As regulators caught up to that, and then you could retarget them, and you could connect a TV buy to a digital buy, and you can really kind of create a full funnel application to that. However, that really kind of called to light of who's listening, and the regulators, the FTC, did crack down on a number of these apps and said we need to have more explicit permission from users to be listening and using their microphone.
So the demand for privacy increased.
Yes.
Still increasing, and it impacted regulations put in place. Lots of work continuing to push for more, especially in North America. What does it look like right now?
Yeah, so currently we do have, California has the CCPA that's been in place since 2020 and has been enforced since 2020. That is being replaced next year with the CPRA, which basically allows a framework to modify and to adapt with new technologies. We also have Virginia, Connecticut, Colorado, and Utah all enforcing their own comprehensive privacy regulations. On the federal level, we also have the House has advanced a bill called the American Data Privacy Protection Act, which actually advanced with overwhelming bipartisan support. A vote was 52 to 2 in favor of advancing this bill. And this is very strict on how American companies can use data.
So this is the first time that there's legislation around privacy on the federal level.
At the federal level.
While in Europe, it started, I think, with 2016, the GDPR.
Yes. So GDPR 2016 was enforced and actually rolled out in May of 2018.
Mm-hmm. So major changes. Now, besides the regulations, let's talk a bit about what's happening in the market. So let's start with Apple. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. So Apple with iOS 14, they rolled out a new feature that specifically required people to opt in to allow apps to use their data. And it was really for a lot of people the first time that they saw explicitly stated, this app will use your data, or this app will use your geolocation or your microphone for this data. Do you want them to do that?
Yeah, so Apple not only they're changing the policy, the reintegrated part of the values of their brand. I mean, I've just seen very recently billboards with privacy. That's iPhone.
Correct. It's always been a core value of Apple to be a privacy-first company, and not only in the app space, but also Safari has deprecated cookies years ago. Yeah. And Chrome is eventually on their way to deprecating cookies as well. But Apple's been a leader in that space. So they've made a promise to consumers that they will be private, and their platform is really backing that up.
So maybe we talk a bit about cookies. I mean, let's start in explaining a bit. I mean, what's the first-party cookies, third-party cookies? I want to hear it from you.
So definitely going back 20 years, cookies were really functional. They were about identifying someone who is a return visitor to your site. They're about like making sure your site is functioning properly and giving you feedback on what type of activity people are taking and if there's a breakage at some point. So over time, that became much more available for other companies outside of the website to start collecting data and aggregating data from several places and reselling that to advertisers.
So users' data became a commodity.
It absolutely became a commodity.
And how users are feeling about that?
Well, as they realize that this is happening, they're starting to push back. Like I mentioned before, they don't know who has access to their data. And that's one of the biggest issues right now is that, and again, what Apple has tried to pull back is letting people know this app will use this part of your phone to collect data. We don't have that with cookies. Cookies are out there. Aggregators are collecting data from everywhere. And it's hard for a user to find out who's using their data and how to opt out of that data.
So I understood that there was an interesting research that has been done within Undertone recently. Can you share a bit?
Yeah, so we did a survey, was 1,000 respondents across all age groups, and we asked them a lot about their feelings towards privacy and data. And one of the probably most interesting data points that we got was that in regards to Apple's ATT, 95% of people were happy that Apple gave them the option to opt out of having their data collected. And what they said is 73% of those people actually did opt out of data collection.
So practically 3/4 of the respondents said that they do not want any data to be collected and passed through to apps.
Exactly. And we did see that a similar number in real life as we are seeing some of the results come back of who's opted in and who hasn't. And what it does and what it tells me and why I think it's the most important question out of that survey is that it shows that nearly everybody was very appreciative and really wants the choice in a simplified fashion of who can use their data and what their data is out there and being used for.
But where does it put the advertisers and us?
So with advertisers, it also sets up two distinct buckets.
Yeah.
So if 25%, give or take, of people allow us to track them and they voluntarily waive their right to privacy, which is what they're doing, then it allows us to then collect that data through whatever alternate identifiers we have, pass that through data clean rooms, and we can really use that to target the way that we've become accustomed to. For the other 75%, with them, privacy is of utmost importance. So we need to look at different ways to target them. If we can't track them, and if we can't tell if they placed an item in their shopping cart and then abandoned it, we can't go back and reconnect with them. However, we can find other ways to use AI or machine learning technology.
So that practically brings us to speak about our solution to the cookieless era, but not only the cookie, the technical. Let's talk about that. There are many solutions now. How would you split them?
Yeah. So the first two buckets I look at is we talk about privacy and security.
Yeah.
They fall within a cookieless realm, but there are two very distinct areas. One of them, the security realm, is for those people that have opted in. We collect data on them. We have personally identifiable information. We are currently going through data clean rooms to anonymize the data so that but the consumer still wants us to keep that data secure. And it's our responsibility as marketers, as we're collecting the data and we're using the data for targeting, to keep that secure. Now, for the other side of things, the people that refuse to waive their right to privacy, it means that we need to be a little bit more sophisticated about how we read the signals as they are shopping or visiting different websites. So, for example, if someone walks into a jewelry store, if you have a really good salesperson behind the counter, they will be able to read a lot of nonverbal cues about that person and how they're walking through the store and what they're engaging with to be able to tell, are they window shopping? Are they potentially in the market for an engagement ring, or are they in the market
just
for other
by the
jewelry?
appearance, how the different signals. They're in a hurry or they're laid back.
Exactly.
So a good salesperson will do, and we are trying to replicate this through AI tools.
Yes, and that's really what Perion sort technology does. Is if you maybe even step back and you think about contextual targeting and site level targeting that were very popular before third-party cookies and are making a resurgence because of the pending demise of cookies, we see that there's a big gap between what contextual targeting can do and what third-party targeting can do. So we're looking at AI to kind of close that gap and pick up not just on, in the example of the jewelry store, the context is a jewelry store. True. Or perhaps each counter that you go to, engagement rings, watches, etc. That's all context.
But the data enrichment are those signals. I mean, what does the person wear? Or
exactly. How do they look at the jewelry? Are they looking for price? Are they comparing, colors? What types of things are we picking up as they're browsing around?
So how do we do it digitally?
So digitally, what we do is with Perion and especially with Undertone, we can see how those people are engaging with the ad units. We can see interactivity. Are they watching a video to completion? Are they clicking a hotspot? Are they more interested in clicking on red cars than blue cars? So we can get that granular.
And this is happening live.
This is happening all live within milliseconds. So every time we have an opportunity to serve an ad, we need to make a decision within a few milliseconds whether or not that is the right environment that we should be placing this ad that's going to deliver a KPI that the advertiser is looking for.
So there's no violation of privacy. We don't store any data about the users.
Nope. We don't collect any personal identifiable information about the user. We don't pixel that user and follow them to other websites. What we do is we find in certain environments, we see that somebody is watching a video in an ad unit, and we know that, hey, if somebody is watching hometown sports highlights from the night before, we know that that is an environment that people are more likely to watch a video to completion.
So I understood that you ran some tests with different clients, and you saw that the performance is actually better.
We've seen across the board, across all categories, nearly double performance from
So this
cookie-based.
is like A/B test, checking cookies,
Correct.
traditional cookies, targeting, and using sort.
Yes, and as we're rolling this out, people do want to test. They want to make sure that it actually does what we promise it will. And for every campaign that we're running right now, we are running cookie-based targeting, our standard, what we've done for years, and we're running a segment that's using sort targeting. And across the board, we're seeing clients that are getting double the performance.
How come? I have some thoughts about it, but what do you think?
So a couple things that are important about it. Like I mentioned, it's really about reaching someone in that moment in time where they're going to be most likely to interact with an ad or click an ad. So that's something that Sort does very, very well because it identifies those areas that people will do that. It also, since it's not reliant on cookies, it scales across all browsers and all environments.
That's what I'm saying. I've done online marketing for years for different brands. And the easiest way is retargeting. That's for years because you have like a certain group that maybe they already shopped in your store, so probably they will convert better. But the problem is that it's always the same. At some point, you exhaust this lookalike. So you exhaust them because it's a small group. And even if they bought once, how many times can they repeat the purchases? Yep. So universe, I think, is bigger, and that's definitely reason.
Absolutely. And that's one of the limitations of cookies or any identifier really is that you are looking for people that took a specific action. Did they put something in their shopping cart? Did they buy something? And you are really limiting to that lower part of the funnel. And it's very important data to try to get those people to convert. But how do you get people from the upper funnel into the lower funnel if we're looking at a purchase funnel? How do you pick up those cues, those kind of nonverbal cues from the jewelry store and get someone from just browsing into actually buying a product?
But we are not alone in the market, and there are other companies that are doing other tactics or strategies to deal with the cookieless world. What are your thoughts about the identifiers, for example?
So the different identifiers that are coming out, what we're hearing back is that the scalability is one of the biggest issues.
Maybe explain a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, as cookies are deprecated, there are different approaches on how people are going to identify users to target. Hashed emails, cell phones, household IDs are all things that have popped up. What is happening is that when you put those through the process of a data clean room, which anonymizes the data and tries to satisfy these upcoming pending regulations, it is very difficult to find those users again and at a significant scale that is going to deliver an advertising budget. So your advertising budgets and your campaign budgets shrink because you cannot reach that many people. So that's something that's important that's happening.
Yeah, and one would argue that it's still invading the privacy of the user.
Absolutely.
With hashing the emails and still.
Absolutely. No matter what, if we are starting with a unique identifier, if we anonymize the data, we still need to reconstitute that data in some fashion to target that specific user again. There may be safeguards in place to keep their data safe and secure, but what is happening is we're still identifying a person based off an action they took in the past.
Yeah, and the users didn't really approve this.
No. By and large, they haven't approved this. And back to that 73%, 27%. There are some people that will allow us to do that. Mm-hmm. But back to the scalability question, if only a quarter of people will allow us to track them and then we have issues of data matching within that group, we have a much diminished scale that we can reach through any of these identifiers.
I'm really curious. I mean, you work in the industry, you know it in and out. So when you get those notifications from, we talked about, surveys and general public, and when you do get those notifications, how do you act?
Well, it's funny. I decline everything. And my family, my wife thinks I'm a little crazy, maybe a little neurotic. But first of all, I want to see how easy it is to opt out. And early on, I actually opted out of several social media platforms because I thought there was just too much data getting out there, and I was starting to see how advertisers were using it, and it started to snowball. And I personally didn't like it as a consumer.
Yeah. So what are the dangers if users will accept?
Yeah, so we've seen anything from data leaks and financial implications to even in the past few years. If you look at not to be political, but if you look at the January 6th trials, where the Department of Justice has been using geolocation to find out who was at the Capitol, who was inside the building that day. All of those people gave access to their geolocation. We also look at the overturning of Roe versus Wade here in the United States, where state governments can now identify if somebody has crossed state lines.
Went to a specific place.
They went to a specific place. If they had a period tracker that they were tracking, and there are any sort of inconsistencies there. So these things are starting to come up. There was actually an issue with Facebook Messenger where a mother and daughter were speaking to each other about the morning after pill, and that became something that the state legislature and the state police were using to prosecute these people. So it has real.
So we all should go back to paper. Letters.
We don't want to be that
landlines.
Exactly, but we do want to make sure that we are monitoring our safety and understanding what is out there.
Yeah, I say at least we should be aware.
Absolutely, we should have a clear and easy way to say I know what data is being shared, and I know what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with. And you should be able to turn off that data wherever it exists.
And I would add that at some point you have the right to delete the data.
Absolutely.
I think that's super important.
So I would say something that's happened over hundreds of years in the United States is that we've seen technology advance to a point where it really outpaces the law. And we're in a phase now where that's happened, where technology companies have kind of taken advantage of some gray areas on some terms that haven't been clearly defined as far as what they're able to do and what they're not. So now we're in a phase just like we were with phone taps when the phone was first invented and people were starting to surveil on phone or surveillance through cameras.
No, even now with the scooters like Lime and Bird. I mean,
absolutely,
the tech companies are just faster than legislators, but at some point they keep up and.
So we're in this phase where now at the state level there are policies, comprehensive privacy regulations being enforced, and at the federal level we're starting to see that with the AdPPA. So we're in this phase where now all of a sudden the government is starting to catch up.
So even the FTC feels that they need to get involved in this privacy issues.
Absolutely, and it's something that Perion has voiced our support for their involvement. It's something that we feel very strongly that people want their privacy. The vast amount of people will not give up their privacy, as we've discussed. And
there are ways to serve the right ads to the right people without violating users' privacy. I think that's a super important point.
Absolutely. So we've voiced our support for the FTC to come in and more clearly define those regulations and really support people's choice for privacy.
Joe, this has been great conversation, super interesting topic, relates to all of us, professionals and just, any person in the street that has a phone or an internet. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact my team at marketing@perion.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you. We'll see you next time in another episode of AdTech Talks. Thank you again, Joe. That was great.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.